I still remember the weight of that trash bag in my hands as I stood on the driveway of what used to be our home. The California sun beat down mercilessly as tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision. "Take your worthless things and get out of my sight," Richard shouted, his voice carrying across the manicured lawn of our Bel Air mansion. Our neighbors, people I'd hosted for dinner parties and charity events, peeked through their curtains, witnessing my humiliation. "Richard, please," I whispered, my voice breaking. "We've been married for 15 years. He laughed coldly, adjusting his Rolex watch, the one I'd given him for our 10th anniversary. 15 wasted years with a trophy wife who brought nothing to the table. Look at you, Clara. You're 42 with no skills, no money, and no future. You were just eye candy that expired." Our housekeeper, Maria, stood at the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. She'd been with us for 12 years and had become like family. I could see the tears in her eyes as she watched Richard throw my belongings onto the driveway, clothes, shoes, jewelry, all stuffed unceremoniously into black trash bags. "Sir," Maria started, "Mrs. Montgomery's mother's jewelry." "Shut up or you're fired," Richard snapped. "She gets what I decide she gets." I flinched as my wedding album hit the pavement, the cover cracking open to reveal our smiling faces from a happier time. Richard and I had met when I was working as a receptionist at his father's law firm. I was 27 then, putting myself through night school for my business degree. He was 35, recently made partner, and the most eligible bachelor in Los Angeles. "You should be grateful I'm letting you take anything," Richard continued, his handsome face twisted with contempt. "The prenup you signed gives you nothing." It was true. I'd signed the prenup without reading it carefully, blinded by love and trust. According to the document, I was entitled to nothing unless the marriage lasted 20 years. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, feeling pathetically small. Richard adjusted his custom Tom Ford suit and smirked. "Not my problem. Maybe call one of your gold digger friends?" "Oh wait, they were all my friends, weren't they?" The truth hit me like a slap. Our social circle consisted entirely of Richard's colleagues, clients, and business associates. I'd spent 15 years being the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinner parties, attending galas, supporting his career. I'd put my own ambitions aside to become what he needed. "My parents," I started, "are dead," he finished cruelly. "And you have no siblings. You have no one, Clara. That's why I picked you. No messy family to deal with." His words cut deeper than any knife. I'd been orphaned at 23 when my parents died in a car accident. Richard had seemed like my savior then, stepping in to help with funeral arrangements, bills, and emotional support. Now I realized he'd seen me as the perfect target, isolated, vulnerable, and grateful. "At least tell me why," I pleaded, needing to understand what had prompted this sudden cruelty after 15 years together. Richard glanced at his watch impatiently. "I've met someone who actually brings value to my life. Melissa is 28, graduated top of her class from Harvard Law, and her father is on the board of Montgomery Industries. She's everything you're not. Young, connected, and an asset, rather than a liability." The doorbell rang, and Richard's face lit up with anticipation. "Perfect timing." A sleek black Tesla pulled into our circular driveway, and a tall, willowy blonde stepped out. She wore a crisp white pantsuit that screamed money and confidence. "Melissa." "Darling, is everything okay?" she called out, eyeing me with a mixture of pity and disgust. "We're going to be late for our meeting with the investors." "Just taking out the trash," Richard replied, wrapping his arm around her waist and kissing her in front of me. "Come inside. I just need to grab my portfolio." They walked into the house, my house, without a backward glance, leaving me standing alone in the driveway, with my life reduced to garbage bags. Maria approached me cautiously, pressing a small envelope into my hand. "Mrs. Montgomery, I saved this from his office when he told me to pack your things," she whispered. "It's not much, but it's the emergency cash you kept in your desk. $2,000. I clutched the envelope, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you, Maria. My sister has a small apartment in Echo Park," she continued hurriedly. "She's away for 2 months working on a cruise ship. You can stay there until you figure things out. Here's the address and key." I hugged her, this woman who had shown me more kindness in this moment than my husband had in years. "I'll never forget this. You go now, before they come back," Maria urged. "I'll try to save more of your things." As I loaded my trash bags into an Uber, I heard Richard and Melissa laughing inside the house. The sound followed me as the car pulled away from the mansion that had been my home for 15 years. I didn't know it then, but that humiliating moment on the driveway wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The Echo Park apartment was a far cry from the 8,000 square foot Bel Air mansion I'd called home. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, and a bathroom with temperamental plumbing. The furniture was mismatched but clean, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear the neighbor's television through them. I sat on the edge of the sagging bed, staring at my phone. No calls, no texts, just notifications from credit card companies. Richard had already cancelled all my cards. My bank account, which had always been joint with his, showed a balance of $0. He'd moved quickly. $2,000. That's all I had to restart my life at 42. The reality of my situation hit me in waves. I'd been completely dependent on Richard, allowing him to handle all our finances. I didn't even know how much he was worth, though I knew it was in the millions. The Montgomery family had old money, and Richard had multiplied it through smart investments in tech startups. I opened my laptop, at least he hadn't taken that, and began to take inventory of my skills. I had a business degree I'd never used. I spoke fluent Spanish and French from our extensive travels. I knew how to manage household staff, plan events, and navigate high society. None of it seemed particularly marketable. I spent the first week in a fog of grief and shock, barely leaving the apartment except to buy essentials at the corner store. I rationed my money carefully, aware that it needed to last until I found a job. On the 8th day, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Clara, it's Martin Weber." Martin was Richard's attorney and had been a fixture at our dinner parties for years. My heart sank. Was this another humiliation Richard had planned? "Martin," I said cautiously, "what can I do for you?" "I'm calling unofficially," he said, his voice low. "Richard doesn't know. Can we meet? There's something you should know." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Silver Lake, far from Richard's usual haunts. Martin arrived looking uncomfortable in casual clothes. I'd only ever seen him in suits. "Thank you for coming," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I've been Richard's attorney for 20 years, but what he's doing to you isn't right." I waited, afraid to hope. 3 years ago, Richard came to me about setting up a separate investment portfolio, Martin explained. "He said it was a surprise for your anniversary, something that would be yours alone." My heart fluttered. Had Richard cared more than I thought? "He opened it in your name, but managed it himself," Martin continued. "The initial investment was $5 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. $5 million? Martin nodded. "It was meant to be your financial independence," he said. "But the thing is, Clara, he never told you about it, and now he's trying to transfer those assets back to himself before you discover them." "Can he do that?" I asked, my mind reeling. "That's the thing," Martin said, sliding a folder across the table. "The account is legally in your name. The paperwork is ironclad. I made sure of it myself. Richard can't touch it without your signature." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were account statements, legal documents, and, most importantly, the current balance of the investment portfolio, $8.7 million. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, suspicious of this sudden windfall. "You're Richard's friend," Martin sighed heavily. "My wife left me last year. Richard told everyone she was crazy, unstable. He isolated me from her, convinced me she was the problem. It took months of therapy to realize how he'd manipulated me, manipulated us both. When I saw him doing the same to you, I couldn't stay silent. I sat back, processing everything. What do I do now? Contact this person, Martin said, writing a name and number on a napkin. Diane Keller. She's a financial advisor who specializes in high-net-worth divorces. She'll help you secure your assets before Richard realizes what's happening. As Martin left, he turned back with one last piece of advice. Clara, Richard has always underestimated you. Don't make the same mistake. Indeed. The next morning, I met with Diane Keller in her downtown office. She was a formidable woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no nonsense. So you've been married to Richard Montgomery for 15 years, and he kicked you out with nothing but some clothes in trash bags, she summarized after I'd explained my situation. I nodded, embarrassed. And now you've discovered you're worth $8.7 million, she continued, reviewing the documents Martin had provided. First things first, we need to secure these assets immediately and then consider our next steps. Next steps? I asked. Diane looked at me over her glasses. Clara, do you want to just take this money and disappear? Or do you want justice? The question hung in the air between us. For 15 years, I'd been the perfect accommodating wife. I'd shrunk myself to fit into Richard's world, careful never to outshine or challenge him. The woman who would have taken the money and disappeared was the old Clara. I wasn't her anymore. I want justice, I said firmly. Diane smiled for the first time. Good, because there's something else you should know about the prenuptial agreement you signed. She pulled out a copy. How she'd obtained it I didn't ask, and pointed to a clause near the end. This states that in the event of infidelity, the prenup is null and void, she explained. Do you have any evidence that Richard was unfaithful during your marriage? I thought about Melissa, about how quickly she had appeared in our lives. I suspect he was seeing his new girlfriend before he kicked me out, but I don't have proof. Then we'll get some, Diane said confidently. In the meantime, let's talk about your other assets. Tell me about the house in Bel Air. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Diane moved with the efficiency of a military general, helping me secure my assets and gathering intelligence on Richard's activities. Your husband made a critical mistake, she told me during one of our meetings. He got arrogant. He thought you were too broken to fight back. We hired a private investigator who confirmed what I'd suspected. Richard and Melissa had been having an affair for over 6 months. The PI provided photos of them at hotels, restaurants, and even on a weekend trip to Napa Valley while I'd been visiting my friend in San Diego. With the infidelity clause triggered, the prenup was invalidated. This opened the door to claiming half of all marital assets, which, as it turned out, were substantial. Richard has been hiding assets, Diane explained as we reviewed the findings of the forensic accountant she'd hired. Offshore accounts, shell companies, properties registered under corporate names. He's worth closer to $50 million, not the 15 he's disclosed in previous tax filings. I was stunned. Even after 15 years of marriage, I hadn't known the true extent of our wealth. But the real bombshell came when Diane discovered that the Bel Air mansion wasn't owned by Richard at all. It was owned by a trust controlled by his father. A trust that, upon the elder Montgomery's death 2 years ago, had passed not to Richard, but to me. It was your father-in-law's insurance policy, Diane explained, showing me the trust documents. He never fully trusted his son. The house was his way of ensuring you'd be taken care of if anything happened. Richard had been living in a house that legally belonged to me, a fact he had concealed by intercepting all communications from the family attorneys after his father's death. Does this mean what I think it means? I asked, hardly daring to hope. Diane's smile was predatory. It means, my dear, that Richard has been illegally occupying your property. You can evict him any time you want. We decided to wait. Timing would be crucial for maximum impact. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life piece by piece. I found a job as an event coordinator at a boutique hotel in downtown LA. The pay wasn't much, but it gave me purpose and a reason to get dressed each morning. I reconnected with old friends from before my marriage, people I'd lost touch with, as Richard had gradually isolated me from anyone who wasn't in his approved social circle. One of these friends was Jake Anderson, who had been my study partner in business school. He'd gone on to build a successful marketing agency specializing in luxury brands. "Clara Montgomery," he said when I walked into his office for lunch one day. "I was beginning to think you'd been abducted by aliens." I laughed, the first genuine laugh in months. Close, abducted by an alien disguised as a husband. Over salads from the deli downstairs, I told Jake everything. The humiliation, the discovery of hidden assets, the revelation about the house. "That bastard," Jake said when I finished. "I never liked him, you know, even back in school." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. Jake shrugged. "Would you have listened? You were head over heels. Besides, he made sure I wasn't around much after the wedding." It was true. Richard had always found reasons to decline invitations from my old friends, eventually stopping them altogether. "Well, I'm listening now," I said, "and I could use your help with something." Jake leaned forward, intrigued. "Name it." "I need to rebuild my professional identity," I explained. "I've been Richard Montgomery's wife for so long, I've forgotten who Clara Turner was before him." Jake considered this. "You were brilliant at strategic planning. Remember our final project? Your presentation on market expansion for that struggling tech company? The professor said it was the best he'd seen in 20 years. The memory surfaced slowly. I'd been proud of that project, confident in my abilities. Somewhere along the way, that confidence had been eroded by Richard's constant, subtle undermining. "I think I know just the place for you," Jake said. "One of my clients is looking for a strategic partnerships director. The pay is excellent, and you'd be perfect for it." 2 interviews later, I had the job. It paid 3 times what I was making at the hotel, with stock options and benefits. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet. The final piece of my plan came together when Diane called with news. "The Montgomery Technologies board meeting is scheduled for next Friday," she said. "Richard will be presenting their quarterly earnings." "Is that significant?" I asked. "Very. According to my source, he's planning to announce a merger with Vancorp, a deal orchestrated by his new girlfriend's father. The merger would dramatically increase the value of his shares." I thought for a moment. "And the house, is everything in place?" "All the paperwork is filed. You can reclaim possession anytime you want." "Next Friday, then," I decided, during the board meeting. Diane's approval was evident in her voice. "I'll make the arrangements." The night before the confrontation, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of my small apartment, looking out at the lights of Los Angeles. Tomorrow would change everything. I would either reclaim my dignity or face another humiliation. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria, my former housekeeper. "He's been horrible to everyone since you left. The new girlfriend redecorated your bedroom and threw out all your photos. We're all rooting for you tomorrow." I texted back a heart emoji, grateful for her loyalty. Then I opened my closet and pulled out the outfit I'd selected for tomorrow. A crimson power suit I'd purchased with my first paycheck from the new job. Not black for mourning the past, but red for the new beginning. Richard had always insisted I wear pastels. "They make you look softer, more feminine," he'd say. It had been another way to diminish me, to ensure I remained decorative rather than commanding. Never again. The morning of the confrontation dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in my crimson suit, applied my makeup with precision, and styled my hair in a sleek bob, a new cut that framed my face and took years off my appearance. Gone was the long, highlighted hair Richard had preferred. Diane picked me up in her Mercedes at 9 a.m. sharp. "Ready?" she asked, handing me a leather portfolio containing all the legal documents I might need. "Ready," I confirmed, surprised to find my hands steady. The nervous woman who had stood crying in a driveway with trash bags was gone. We drove to Bel Air in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we approached the gates of what was legally my home, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "The board meeting starts at 10. Diane reminded me. Richard will be presenting until at least 11:30. We have the sheriff meeting us there at 10:15 to serve the eviction notice to whoever's at the house, likely just the staff. But as we pulled up to the gates, I noticed something unexpected. Richard's Aston Martin was in the driveway. "He's home," I said, surprised. "He should be at the meeting." Diane checked her phone. "My contact says the meeting was delayed until noon. Change of plans. We serve him directly." The sheriff's car pulled up behind us, and Diane briefed him quickly on the situation. Then we approached the front door together, Diane, the sheriff, and me. I rang the doorbell, the sound echoing through the house I had once called home. After a moment, the door swung open to reveal Richard in a bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, clearly not expecting visitors. His expression when he saw me was priceless. First confusion, then anger, then a flash of something that might have been fear before he masked it with contempt. "What is this?" he demanded, looking between me and the sheriff. "Some kind of joke?" "Richard Montgomery?" the sheriff asked formally. "Yes, obviously," Richard snapped. "What do you want?" The sheriff handed him an envelope. "You're being served with an eviction notice. This property belongs to Clara Montgomery through the Edward Montgomery Living Trust. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." Richard's face drained of color as he snatched the envelope. "This is ridiculous. This is my house. My father left it to me," I finished for him. "You've known that for 2 years, Richard, ever since your father died and you intercepted the trust documents." Richard's eyes darted to Diane, recognizing her reputation as one of LA's most formidable divorce attorneys. "Whatever she's paying you," he said to her, "I'll double it." Diane smiled coldly. "Ms. Turner is not only my client, she's also become my friend. And unlike you, I value loyalty over money." Richard turned his attention back to me, his voice dropping to the manipulative tone I knew so well. "Clara, darling, there's been a misunderstanding. We can work this out between us without all these—" He gestured dismissively at Diane and the sheriff. "Outsiders." Actually," I said, stepping past him into the foyer, "I'm here to collect some of my belongings. Personal items that weren't included in the trash bags you so generously provided." I walked confidently through the house, aware of Richard following me, spluttering threats about restraining orders and lawsuits. The sheriff followed at a discreet distance, ensuring things remained civil. In the master bedroom, I found Melissa lounging in what had once been my bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked up in shock when I entered. "What is she doing here?" she demanded of Richard. "Collecting what's mine," I replied before Richard could answer. I opened my jewelry box, still in its place on the dresser, and removed my mother's diamond earrings and the sapphire necklace my grandmother had left me. "Richard, do something," Melissa hissed. But Richard stood frozen, watching as I moved methodically through the room, collecting photos, keepsakes, and personal documents. "By the way," I said casually as I gathered my things, "I've also frozen all the accounts you didn't think I knew about." The Cayman Islands setup was particularly interesting. Did you really think naming the shell company after your childhood dog was clever? Richard's face contorted with rage. "You had no right." "I had every right," I cut him off. "We're still legally married, and thanks to your infidelity, the prenup is invalid. Half of everything is mine, Richard, including your shares in Montgomery Technologies." "That's impossible," he whispered, but I could see the realization dawning that I had outmaneuvered him. "Oh, and one more thing," I added, enjoying the moment perhaps more than I should have. "The board is aware that you've been embezzling funds through fake consultancy fees. That evidence came from your father's private files. He'd been building a case against you before he died." "Maddy, this was a bluff." But Richard's reaction told me it had hit home. His face went from red to white in an instant. "You're lying," he managed, but his voice lacked conviction. I smiled. "Am I? I guess we'll find out at the emergency board meeting this afternoon, won't we? The one where they'll be voting on your position as CEO." As I headed for the door, I paused to address Melissa, who was watching the exchange with growing horror. "A word of advice. Get your name off any joint accounts now. When Richard falls, he'll take everyone around him down too. It's what he does. In the driveway, I turned back to look at the house one last time. Richard stood in the doorway, his bathrobe hanging open over his pajamas, his carefully cultivated image of power and control completely shattered. "You have until tomorrow morning to remove your things," I said. "After that, the locks will be changed." Back in Diane's car, I finally allowed myself to breathe. "That went even better than I expected," Diane said, starting the engine. "It's not over yet," I reminded her. "Richard won't go down without a fight." "Let him try," Diane said confidently. "We have everything documented. The board members I've spoken with are appalled by his behavior, both professional and personal. The photos of him throwing your belongings into trash bags didn't help his case." I looked at her in surprise. "Photos?" Diane smiled. "Your neighbor's security camera caught the whole thing. Apparently, she never liked Richard either." As we drove away, I felt the weight of 15 years lifting from my shoulders. I wasn't naive enough to think the road ahead would be easy. There would be legal battles, public scrutiny, and difficult days. But for the first time in years, I was driving toward a future of my own making. Not as Richard Montgomery's wife, but as Clara Turner, strategic partnerships director, homeowner, and woman who had discovered her own power. 3 months later, I moved back into the Bel Air house. Not because I needed the grand space or the status it represented, but because it symbolized everything I had reclaimed. The first thing I did was invite Maria and her family for dinner, served in the formal dining room where they had never been allowed to eat. We laughed and shared stories, and I offered Maria's daughter a college scholarship from the foundation I had established with part of my settlement. As for Richard, the last I heard, he was living in a condo in Phoenix after the board removed him as CEO and began legal proceedings for the embezzled funds. Melissa had left him within weeks of his downfall. Sometimes I think about that day on the driveway, holding a trash bag filled with my belongings. I had felt so small then, so worthless. If I could go back and whisper something to that broken woman, I would tell her, "This isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning." And I would be right.